As I stood in the doorway, the weight of betrayal crashed over me like a tidal wave. My heart raced and my mind spiraled into chaos. How could she do this to me? The image of her laughing with him, the news reporter, gnawed at my insides. I had always trusted her, believed in our love. But now that trust lay shattered at my feet. I felt a dark urge rising within me, a desire for revenge that I had never known before. It was a mundane Tuesday afternoon when I stumbled upon the truth. I returned home early from work, eager to surprise my wife, Sarah, with her favorite takeout. The scent of fried rice filled the air as I entered our modest apartment. The soft glow of the living room lamp illuminated the space, casting shadows that danced along the walls, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I dropped the takeout bag on the kitchen counter and called out for her. No response. My stomach twisted in anticipation. I moved through our small home, the silence amplifying my anxiety. As I approached the bedroom, I caught a glimpse of her phone lying on the coffee table. Screen lit up with a message notification, the name Jake boldly displayed. Jake, the local news reporter. A name I had heard her mention a few times but never thought twice about. Against my better judgment, I picked up her phone. My heart raced and my palms grew clammy as I unlocked it. The messages were innocent at first, friendly banter about work, a shared joke about a recent news story. But as I scrolled, the tone shifted. The playful exchanges morphed into something more intimate, more dangerous. My breath caught in my throat as I read the words, "Can't wait to see you tonight, just us." The ground beneath me felt like it was crumbling. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, trying to process the betrayal as pain pierced through my chest. The laughter we shared, the moments we cherished, how could it all be a facade? How could she betray me with someone like him? A man who reported on the lives of others, yet couldn't see the devastation he was wreaking on mine. I stumbled back, the phone slipping from my grasp and clattering to the floor. The sound echoed in the silence, mirroring the chaos in my mind. I felt like a stranger in my own home, surrounded by memories that now felt tainted. I wanted to scream, to shake her awake from whatever fantasy she had slipped into. But instead I was frozen, rooted to the spot in disbelief. Images flashed through my mind, Sarah and Jake sharing drinks after work, their laughter ringing in my ears, the secret glances, the stolen moments. I felt sick, my stomach churning as anger coursed through my veins. How could she do this to me? I had been nothing but faithful, devoted. She was my world, and now it felt like that world was crumbling around me. The urge for revenge began to bubble beneath the surface. I could not let this go unanswered. I needed to expose the truth, not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever trusted her. I needed to make Jake pay for his betrayal, to ruin his career the way he was ruining my life. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself as a plan began to take shape in my mind. I would investigate. I would find out everything I could about their affair, and then I would strike. Thought of it ignited a fire within me, pushing aside the pain momentarily. I was no longer a victim. I would become something more, a force to be reckoned with. But first, I needed to gather evidence. I needed to know how deep this went. My heart raced as I felt a sick thrill of determination. I wouldn't let her get away with this. I would turn her betrayal into a story that would shake the foundations of their world. The days that followed my discovery were a blur of anger and obsession. I transformed from a heartbroken husband into a man on a mission. I had always been the kind of person who avoided drama, the kind who believed in resolving conflicts quietly and respectfully. But now I found myself in a dark place, fueled by betrayal and the need for revenge. I started my investigation with the simplest of tools, the internet. I scoured social media, looking for any signs of Sarah and Jake's relationship. I found pictures of them together at various events, always in the background, always with smiles that now felt like daggers. I saved every screenshot, every post that hinted at their connections. It was a sickening process, watching them live their lives while I felt like a ghost in my own home. I spent hours dissecting their interactions, looking for clues. I learned about Jake's recent stories, his interviews, and the way he had a knack for getting close to people, making them comfortable enough to spill their secrets. It was infuriating to see how he had charmed his way into Sarah's life. I wondered how many other lives he had touched inappropriately, how many families he had disrupted without a second thought. Then I decided to go further. I needed to know more about their affair, how long it had been going on, and what they had shared. I started following Sarah discreetly. It felt wrong, almost like stalking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to know the truth. I would sit in my car, parked a few blocks away from our apartment, watching as she left for her daily routine. I tracked her movements, her meetings, and her late nights. One evening, I followed her to a bar downtown, a trendy place that buzzed with life. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I watched her enter, her laughter blending with the crowd. I waited, my heart pounding, until I saw him walk in. Jake. He was everything I had expected, confident, charming, and completely at ease. My blood boiled as I watched them greet each other with a hug that lingered too long. I sat there, hidden in the shadows, feeling like a voyeur to my own life. As they shared drinks, I could see the chemistry between them. It was sickening. I clenched my fists, my mind racing with thoughts of how I could expose them. I took out my phone and started recording, capturing every moment. I wanted proof, something that would solidify my resolve and give me the ammunition I needed. As the night wore on, I watched them grow closer, their conversation turning more intimate. I could see the way Sarah looked at him, the way she smiled. It was a look I thought was reserved for me. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I realized how easily she had moved on, how quickly she could forget the vows we had made. After what felt like an eternity, they finally left the bar, stumbling slightly as they walked down. The street laughter echoing in the night air. I followed them, my heart racing with a mixture of anger and despair. They ended up at a hotel, and that was when I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't let this go unanswered. I couldn't let them continue this charade while I sat idly by. I made my way home, feeling the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I had recorded enough evidence to expose them, but I needed to think carefully about how to go about it. I had to ensure that the story I leaked would not only ruin Jake's career, but also serve as a reminder to Sarah of what she had lost. In the following days, I meticulously planned my next steps. I gathered all the evidence I had collected, photos, recordings, and messages. I reached out to a few contacts I had in the media, people I knew would be interested in a scandal involving a prominent news reporter. I toyed with the idea of anonymity, wanting to remain in the shadows while ensuring that my message was loud and clear. The moral implications of my actions weighed heavily on me. I knew I was crossing a line, but the anger inside me drowned out any sense of guilt. I told myself that this was justice, that I was merely righting a wrong. I would not be a victim. I would take control of my narrative. As I sat at my computer, staring at the screen filled with the evidence of their betrayal, I felt a mix of satisfaction and dread. This was my way of reclaiming my power, of confronting the pain that had consumed me. I had never imagined I would resort to something so drastic, but the betrayal had awakened a darker side within me, one that craved retribution. The decision to leak the story was becoming clearer, and I could almost taste the freedom it promised. I was ready to turn the tables and expose their deceit to the world. It was a cold, rainy night when I finally made the decision. I sat alone in our dimly lit living room, the sound of raindrops pattering against the window echoing the turmoil in my heart. The evidence I had gathered lay spread out before me, screenshots of messages, video clips of Sarah and Jake at the bar, and photographs of their clandestine meetings. Each piece was a reminder of the betrayal that had shattered my world. I was at a crossroads, and I could feel the weight of my choice pressing down on me. I thought about what it would mean to expose them. I envisioned the headlines: local news reporter caught in scandalous affair with married woman. I could already hear the gasps of disbelief, the whispers of gossip that would ripple through the community. My mind raced with possibilities, each more intoxicating than the last. This was my chance to reclaim my dignity, to turn the tables on the man who had taken my wife from me. But with every thought of revenge came a wave of doubt. Was I really willing to destroy Jake's career, to ruin Sarah's reputation? I had always believed in fairness and justice, Yet here I was, contemplating an act that could have devastating consequences for more than just them. My heart ached at the thought of what this would do to Sarah's life. But then I reminded myself of my own pain, the betrayal that had left me hollow. I wrestled with the moral implications of my decision. Was I justified in seeking revenge? Did my anger give me the right to inflict pain on others? I could hear her voice in my head, the sweet tone of her laughter that had once brought me joy now twisted into mockery. I remembered the moments we had shared, the dreams we had built together, and then I thought about how easily she had thrown it all away. I felt a surge of rage as I replayed the memories of her with Jake in my mind. The thought of their intimacy, their shared laughter, made my blood boil. I had loved her fiercely, and she had betrayed that love without a second thought. I was tired of being the victim. I wanted her to feel the same pain I had endured, the same heartache that had twisted my insides into knots. As the rain continued to fall, I made my choice. I would expose them. I would leak the story. The thought sent a thrill of adrenaline coursing through me, a sense of empowerment that I hadn't felt in weeks. I picked up my phone, my hands shaking with a mixture of fear and excitement. This was it, the moment I would take control of my life again. I reached out to an old friend from college who had connections in the media. I drafted a message, carefully crafting my words to convey the seriousness of the situation without revealing my identity just yet. I have a story that could shake the local news scene. A prominent reporter is involved in an affair with a married woman. I can provide evidence. I hesitated before hitting send, my heart racing as I considered the implications of my actions. After a moment, I pressed the button. The message was sent, and I felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with fear. What had I just done? I was crossing a line, stepping into a territory that could lead to chaos. But the thought of Jake's career crumbling, of Sarah's world turning upside down, filled me with a sense of satisfaction that dulled the nagging voice of doubt in my mind. In the following days, I waited anxiously for a response. Each time my phone buzzed, my heart leaped into my throat, only to fall when it was an unrelated notification. I was on edge, packing the apartment as I imagined the fallout of my actions. Would my friend take me seriously? Would he understand the gravity of the situation? And what would happen when the story broke? Would Sarah confront me? Would she beg for forgiveness? The anticipation was excruciating. I felt like I was standing on a precipice, looking down into the abyss. I craved the release that would come from exposing them, but I also feared the consequences. Would I be able to live with myself after this? Would I be able to face Sarah again, knowing that I had played a hand in destroying her life? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I received a response. I'm interested. Let's meet. My heart raced as I read the message. This was it. I was about to embark on a path that would irrevocably change my life. I agreed to meet him the next day at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, a place where we could talk without drawing attention. As I prepared for the meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. I had made my choice, and now I had to see it through. I had to embrace the darkness that had taken root within me. I was no longer just a husband betrayed. I was a man seeking justice, a man ready to take back control. The next day, as I walked into the cafe, I felt a mixture of fear and determination. I would tell my story and reveal the truth. There was no turning back now. The cafe was bustling with life, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the chatter of patrons. I sat at a corner table, my heart racing as I waited for my friend to arrive. Each tick of the clock felt like a countdown to an explosion. My emotions were a tangled mess of anxiety and anticipation. I was about to unleash a storm that would engulf not only Jake and Sarah, but also myself in its wake. When my friend Mark finally walked in, I felt a surge of relief. He was the kind of person who had always had my back, a loyal friend who had never let me down. As he approached the table, I could see the curiosity on his face, mixed with concern. I gestured for him to sit, my hands trembling slightly as I prepared to reveal the truth. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my mind. "I have something important to discuss." Mark leaned in, his expression shifting from curiosity to seriousness. "What's going on? You sounded urgent in your message." I took a deep breath, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. "It's about Jake, the reporter. He's involved in an affair with my wife, Sarah." His eyes widened in surprise, and my heart sank as I watched his reaction. I had expected sympathy, maybe even anger, but instead I saw disbelief. "Are you sure? That's a serious accusation." I nodded vigorously, pulling out my phone to show him the evidence. I slid it across the table and he began scrolling through the messages and photos I had compiled. I could sense his skepticism dissipating as he absorbed the information. "Damn," Mark said, shaking his head. This is huge. You're sure you want to do this? Once it's out, there's no going back." I leaned back in my chair, feeling a mix of fear and resolve. "I know, but I can't just sit back and let them get away with this. They've ruined my life and I want to expose them. I want everyone to know the truth." Mark looked at me for a long moment, weighing my words. "Okay, but we need to be careful. If we're going to leak this, we need to make sure it's airtight. We can't risk being seen as the bad guys here." I nodded, grateful for his caution. "I've got everything documented. I just need your help to get it into the right hands. I want this story to break wide open." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I know a few reporters who would jump at the chance to cover a story like this. We can make it happen, but we have to be discreet. No names, no direct contact with you. We can't let them trace it back to us." As we discussed the details, a sense of exhilaration washed over me. This was it. I was finally taking control of my life, of my narrative. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in weeks, the adrenaline coursing through me as I imagined the fallout of my actions. After we finalized our plan, Mark assured me he would handle the logistics. He would reach out to the reporters he knew and present the story as a tip-off from an anonymous source. I felt a surge of confidence as I realized I was no longer just a victim. I was a player in this game, orchestrating my own revenge. As we parted ways, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. What would happen when the story broke? Would Sarah confront me? Would she try to deny everything? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but I pushed it aside. I had made my choice and there was no turning back. In the following days, I waited anxiously for news. I could feel the tension building within me, a knot of anxiety that refused to loosen. Each time my phone buzzed, I felt my heart race, hoping it would be Mark with an update. But as the days turned into a week, I began to wonder if I had made a mistake. Was I really prepared for the consequences of my actions? Finally, the day came. Mark called me early in the morning, his voice tinged with excitement. "It's happening. The story is going live today. Be ready." I felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with fear. This was it. I had set the wheels in motion and there was no stopping it now. I spent the day packing the apartment, my mind racing with thoughts of how Sarah would react, how Jake would respond. Would they confront me? Would they try to spin the story in their favor? As the hours ticked by, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I had sought revenge, but now the reality of my actions was sinking in. Would I be able to live with myself after this? The thought of Sarah's face when she found out tormented me. I had loved her once. How could I do this to someone I once cherished? When the clock struck 6, my phone buzzed with a notification. The headline appeared on my screen: "Local news reporter exposed in scandalous affair." My heart dropped as I read the article. It detailed the affair, the evidence I had provided, and the fallout that would surely follow. I felt a mix of triumph and horror wash over me. I had done it. I had exposed them, but as I read the words on the screen, I realized that my life would never be the same again. The storm I had unleashed was just beginning, and I was standing in the eye of it, waiting for the chaos to unfold. The next few days were a whirlwind of chaos. The story broke like a dam bursting, flooding the local news outlets and social media with headlines about Jake's affair with Sarah. The fallout was immediate and explosive. I watched from the sidelines, a mixture of satisfaction and horror churning in my stomach as the world reacted to the scandal I had orchestrated. Jake was suddenly thrust into the spotlight, his career hanging by a thread. News crews camped outside his house, reporters clamoring for comments, and the public was hungry for more details. I could almost hear the collective gasp of disbelief from our community as they learned about the affair, the betrayal that had been hidden behind closed doors. I felt a sick sense of power, knowing that I had played a role in this unraveling. But with that power came an unsettling weight. I had wanted revenge, but now I was forced to confront the consequences of my actions. I saw Sarah's name plastered across the news as well, her image splashed in articles that dissected the affair. The betrayal I had felt was now laid bare for everyone to see, and I could only imagine the humiliation she was enduring. As the days passed, I noticed a change in the atmosphere around me. Friends and acquaintances began to whisper, their glances filled with pity and confusion. I was no longer just a husband scorned. I had become the villain in this narrative. People began to question my motives, wondering if I had exposed the affair out of love or sheer vindictiveness. I felt the weight of their judgments, and it was suffocating. The phone calls started rolling in, friends reaching out to express their concern, acquaintances wanting to know the details. I put on a brave face, telling them I was okay, that I had needed to take a stand. But inside I was crumbling. I had imagined this moment as a victory, a way to reclaim my power, but now it felt hollow. I had unleashed a storm, and I was left standing in the wreckage. One evening, as I sat alone in the dim light of our living room, I received a call from Sarah. My heart raced as I picked up the phone, unsure of what to expect. "We need to talk," she said, her voice shaky. I could hear the hurt and anger behind her words, and it twisted the knife of regret deeper into my chest. I agreed to meet her at a nearby park, a neutral ground where we could talk without the chaos of our lives intruding. As I approached, I saw her sitting on a bench, her head down, looking small and fragile. My heart ached at the sight of her. This was the woman I had loved, the woman I had once planned a future with. Yet now she was a shadow of herself, weighed down by the consequences of our choices. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking as I sat beside her. "Why would you do this?" I struggled to find the words, the emotions swirling within me like a storm. "You betrayed me, Sarah. I felt like I had no choice. You hurt me, and I wanted you to feel the same pain." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I never wanted to hurt you. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I didn't know how to fix it, but this is not the answer. You've ruined everything." Her words cut deeper than any knife. I had wanted her to suffer, but now I could see the devastation in her eyes, the anguish I had inadvertently caused. "I thought I was taking control, that I was making things right," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head, her expression a mix of anger and heartbreak. "You've made it worse. You've put our lives on display for everyone to judge. You've taken away any chance of reconciliation." I felt the weight of her words settle heavily on my chest. I had wanted revenge, but I had also wanted closure, a chance to confront our pain together. Instead, I had created a chasm that seemed insurmountable. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. I had sacrificed everything for the sake of my anger. "I'm sorry," I managed to say, the words feeling inadequate. "I didn't know what else to do. I just wanted to expose the truth." "The truth?" she echoed, voice laced with bitterness. "You've exposed us both. You've turned our lives into a spectacle. There's no coming back from this." We sat in silence, the weight of our choices hanging heavily between us. I had thought I could reclaim my power, but instead I had lost everything that mattered. The anger that had fueled my actions began to dissipate, replaced by a profound sense of emptiness. I had wanted to hurt Jake, to make him pay for his betrayal, but in doing so I had only hurt myself and the woman I once loved. As I looked at Sarah, I realized that revenge had not brought me peace. It had only deepened the wounds. I had become the very thing I despised, a man consumed by anger, willing to destroy others to ease my own pain. I felt the darkness closing in around me, and I knew that I had to confront the reality of my actions. In the days that followed, the news continued to unfold. Jake was suspended from his job, his reputation in tatters. Sarah faced scrutiny and judgment from friends and family, her world turned upside down. And me, I was left standing in the ashes of what had once been a life filled with love and trust, grappling with the consequences of a decision I could never take back. I had sought justice, but what I found was a haunting emptiness. I had to face the truth. Revenge had not healed my wounds, it had only deepened them. As the dust settled from the whirlwind of chaos I had unleashed, I found myself grappling with the reality of my choices. The headlines had faded, the initial shock of the affair had worn off, but the consequences lingered like a dark cloud over my life. I had exposed Jake and Sarah, but in doing so, I had also exposed my own vulnerabilities and insecurities. The thrill of revenge had quickly transformed into a bitter lesson in loss and regret. In the weeks that followed, I watched as Jake's life unraveled. His career, once vibrant and promising, lay in ruins. He had been a respected journalist, but now he was just a name associated with scandal. I felt a pang of satisfaction at the thought of his downfall, yet it was overshadowed by the emptiness that gnawed at my soul. I had wanted him to suffer, but I hadn't anticipated how hollow that victory would feel. Sarah, too, was a victim of the fallout. The whispers and judgment from friends and family were relentless. I had watched her go from a vibrant woman full of life to a shadow of herself, consumed by shame and regret. I had thought I would find solace in her pain, but instead, I found myself haunted by the memories of the love we once shared. The laughter, the dreams, the plans for our future, they all felt like distant echoes now, drowned out by the noise of betrayal. One night as I sat alone in our apartment, I reflected on everything that had transpired. The walls felt suffocating, the silence deafening. I realized that in seeking revenge, I had lost not only Sarah but also a part of myself. The man I had been, a husband, a partner, had been swallowed by the darkness of anger and betrayal. I had sacrificed my values, my integrity, all in the name of revenge. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the messages and photos I had once clung to as evidence of Sarah's betrayal. They were no longer weapons, but reminders of a love that had crumbled under the weight of choices made in anger. I felt a deep sorrow wash over me as I recognized the futility of my actions. Revenge had not healed my wounds, it had only deepened them, leaving scars that would take a long time to fade. As the days turned into weeks, I made a decision. I needed to confront my feelings, to seek closure not just for myself but for Sarah as well. I reached out to her, asking if we could meet one last time. I wanted to apologize, to acknowledge the hurt I had caused, and to find a way to move forward, if not together, then at least apart with some semblance of understanding. When we met, the air was thick with tension. We stood across from each other, the weight of our shared history hanging heavily between us. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "I let my anger consume me. I thought I was taking control, but I only created more pain." Sarah looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of hurt and understanding. "I know I made mistakes, but I never wanted it to come to this. I thought we could work through it, but you took away any chance we had." "I know," I replied, my heart aching. I was so focused on revenge that I didn't see the damage I was causing. I thought exposing the truth would bring me peace, but it only left me feeling more lost. We talked for hours, sharing our feelings, our regrets, and our hopes for the future. It was a painful conversation, but it was necessary, a step toward healing. I realized that while our relationship might never be the same, there was a possibility for forgiveness, for moving on. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. As we parted ways, I felt a sense of closure beginning to take root. I had confronted my demons, faced the consequences of my actions, and acknowledged the pain I had caused. It was a difficult journey, but one that was necessary for my growth. In the months that followed, I began to rebuild my life. I focused on self-reflection, seeking therapy to help me process my emotions and navigate the complex web of feelings that had consumed me. I learned that revenge was a fleeting satisfaction, a temporary escape from the pain. What I truly sought was healing, understanding, and the ability to forgive, not just Sarah, but myself. I also began to distance myself from the anger that had fueled my actions. I sought to surround myself with positivity, to reconnect with friends and family who had stood by me through the turmoil. Slowly, I found myself emerging from the shadows, rediscovering the joy in life that had once felt so distant. As I contemplated the future, I realized that love and trust are fragile. Betrayal can shatter them in an instant, but healing takes time and effort. I had learned that revenge might seem like a path to reclaiming power, but true strength lies in forgiveness and the ability to move forward despite the pain. In the end, I understood that life is not about the battles we fight, but about the lessons we learn along the way. I had faced my demons and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held. I would carry the scars of my past, but they would no longer define me. Instead, they would serve as a reminder of the journey I had taken, a journey toward healing, understanding, and ultimately redemption. As I looked toward the horizon, I felt a sense of peace settling within me. I was ready to let go of the anger, to embrace the lessons learned, and to step into a future filled with hope and possibility. The past was behind me, and the future awaited.